I am here to make a small presentation on autism on behalf of the Autism Society of India. Spectrum. Spectrum is a word that I'm going to be using often in this presentation. As I stand before you, I realize that the audience here today also falls on a spectrum vis-a-vis your own understanding of autism. Many of you live with autism, and what else can I say to you but that we are co-travelers. For some of you, your introduction to autism may have been through Jhilmil, Priyanka Chopra's character in Barfi. And for others, this may be the first time you are hearing the word. So what is autism? Samyukta, the 7-year-old sister of Sanjana, who is on the autism spectrum, has this to say. Like we are normal children, there are children with special needs. They need help to understand and talk to others. They could have autism. Like that, my sister Sanjana has autism. But for some things, she knows better than me. When she was less than 3 years old, she knew the car numbers of at least 40 people. When she was 2.5 and I was 4, I didn't know the spelling of helicopter. My sister knew the spelling. But Sanju had bad days. She used to scream whole day, bang her head, cry too much. Those days she never played with me. She used to do strange things like laugh simply, banging table very hardly, moving her hands near her mouth. My sister did not know how to even jump, but now she does. Although she has language problems, she is brilliant in by-hearting Doraemon Hindi dialogues, and she says it so funnily and makes us laugh. This sensitive account of autism by a 7-year-old is so deeply moving because it captures the essence of autism. The difficulties persons with autism have in making sense of the world around them, their sometimes extraordinary abilities, and the fact that they can be helped to negotiate the world in ways that make it easier for them. So what is autism? Autism is a complex neurodevelopmental disorder, which is not a disease, and simply put, can just be said to be a condition where the brain is wired differently. The next slide. The cause of autism is not known, but a combination of genetic and environmental factors are thought to be responsible. Autism is increasing at a phenomenal pace. We don't have figures in the Indian context, but the US figures say that in a 6-year span between 91 and 97, the pediatric prevalence of autism has increased a staggering 556%, which is higher than the combined increase of diabetes, cancer, and AIDS. Though there is no data on the Indian scenario, even if we take a conservative estimate of 1 in 250, we probably have 44 lakh people with autism in India. The next slide. Autism creates difficulties in areas like language and communication, social interaction, rigidity of thought, and sensory processing. I'd like to, over the next 2 slides, talk about what people with autism themselves feel, because there is really no one who can say it better than they themselves. Next slide. One of the things is of the rigidity of thought that people with autism seem to have. And Tito Mukhopadhyay, who's written many books, says this. This is when the power goes out, whenever there is a power outage. This is what he says. My trust in the predictability of switches would turn to a feeling of suffocation and then into fear. I would hear a scream from my voice, exploding all my disbelief, frustration, and anger. I would stop only if I was exhausted or if power was restored. Next slide. Temple Grandin says this. From as far as I can remember, I always hated to be hugged. I wanted to experience the good feeling of being hugged, but it was just too overwhelming. What is important to understand here is that the disorder is a spectrum. Each individual on the spectrum has her or his own unique abilities and their own unique limitations. You could have someone who could write profound poetry and also someone who finds it difficult to communicate basic needs. You could have someone whose balancing could put a gymnast to shame and someone who may not be able to button a shirt. As we deliberate inclusion today, we need to be informed by the perspective of a young woman with autism. Judy Endow talks of needing what she calls both the breadth and the depth of inclusion. She appreciates inclusion as it helps her navigate the community around her. And she says sometimes it doesn't work for her. It doesn't work for her primarily because, and I quote, inclusion happens via neurotypical style. It is people like us who consider ourselves neurotypical who lay down the rules for inclusion of people with autism, and that, of course, will not work for them. She also talks about needing the depth of inclusion, which is the space to be herself in a group or a community of other people like her, of other people with autism. And the most important thing she says is that the task for parents and educators is really to build the ability in persons with autism to be able to choose and decide what mix of inclusion is the best for them. So what do we need to do? We need to drive inclusion, putting the person with autism at the center. It's not about making the person with autism more and more neurotypical and then saying, hey, look, we include you. But it is about building inclusion on two pillars: the pillar of their own strengths and the pillar of compassion. Many persons with autism show extraordinary abilities and strength that can be leveraged in education, employment, and community life. But inclusion cannot be built on this alone. A truly inclusive outlook needs to bear in mind that since we are talking of a spectrum, a reality that we do face is that some people with autism may not be able to adapt as well to a neurotypical world. We as a community, as a society, need to care for them. This task of looking after them cannot be one only for the family. The community will have to take this on. How do we make this possible? At the macro level, we need to have an approach that encompasses the lifespan and is systemic in nature. Efforts today largely concentrate on early intervention, with 0 to 6 years being the area where there's most attention. While this is good, persons with autism are across all ages. They grow, they reach adolescence, they need to be prepared for employment, for independent or assisted living. We need to focus also on needs of people across the lifespan, constantly asking ourselves what inclusion would mean to the individual, bearing in mind the level of support and the level of independence that is possible at each stage. In other words, inclusion too would need to be on a spectrum. Intervention needs to be systemic, not scattered and isolated as it is today. There is no clear system or plan of diagnosis and intervention. Private practice, either in clinical settings or to a lesser extent in private schools, is what exists. What we need is a system by which, following diagnosis, a child is referred to specialized services located within a school setting. A school which caters to children with and without autism, but where the specific and unique learning and training needs of children with autism are addressed. The next step would be to ensure greater interaction between the world of work or employment and the training ground. It is indeed very heartening to see the initiatives that have emerged in the area of employment over the last couple of years. As Autism Society of India, we would like to applaud companies like SAP Labs, Vidya Infotech, Taj Group of Hotels, and many others who are reaching out and identifying processes where skills of persons with autism can be put to good business use. I see tremendous potential in the artistic community to help include persons with autism. Many persons with autism are endowed with a very refined sense of the aesthetic, manifested through exceptional abilities in music, movement, or visual art and design. Harnessing and building on this would be a wonderful way to ensure not just their inclusion, but their contribution to the development of the arts. The same would hold true for the sporting community also. The opportunity and the potential is immense. We need to practice inclusion not just as an ideal, but as a living, breathing reality, the way we build our lives. It's time to give uniformity the push. It's time to respect and celebrate diversity. And as I conclude, I would just leave you with this one thought. I know of nobody who is purely autistic or purely neurotypical. Even God had some autistic moments, which is why the planets all spin. Thank you.